Today's episode is brought to you by Patients Getting Paid, the new course in development by FUMS. I was diagnosed with MS 10 years ago and had to give up my job. My paycheck stopped, but my bills didn't. I needed to find employment that worked with my schedule when I was mentally clear and rested, and that worked around doctor's appointments and hospital infusions. I went looking for a solution, and I actually found several. There are companies looking for our experience as chronic illness patients, and they're willing to pay us to share it with them. There are legitimate work-from-home opportunities out there too, and even recruiters specific to matching us with those legit opportunities. And there are a multitude of opportunities to have our own online businesses. If any of this resonates with you, sign up for the email list and be the first to get more information when the course launches. Sign up now at fumsnow.com/patientsgettingpaid. Welcome to the FUMS Now podcast show, where you'll gain information, inspiration, and motivation for living your best life with multiple sclerosis. Find us online at fumsnow.com. I'm your host, Kathy Reagan-Young. Today's guest is Mindy Eisenberg, a former hospital administrator turned yoga instructor who's dedicated to increasing the quality of life for those with disabilities in loving memory of her mother who had progressive MS. I met Mindy in 2017 at an MS World Talks conference in Pittsburgh and instantly fell in love with her. She's one of those people whose love and kindness just emanates from their pores. She's helped countless people with MS and other neurological diseases, and she can help you too. I'm honored to introduce you to her. Hey, Mindy, thanks so much for being with us today.
Oh, my pleasure to be with you.
Well, you and I met, I guess, just about a year ago, actually, now in Pittsburgh at the MS World Talks conference. And I've wanted to have you on the podcast ever since. You gave such a great demonstration that day of adaptive yoga with someone like in a regular chair and someone in a wheelchair, and they each got a lot out of it. I knew then that I wanted to share your story with the FUMS community. So again, thank you so much for being here today. Appreciate it.
It was quite a memory.
Yeah, it was great. Your connection to MS is your mom, right?
Yes, my mother had progressive MS.
Mm-hmm.
She had it for over 25 years.
Wow.
And I was about somewhere around 5 years old when she got diagnosed.
Now, did she do yoga?
She did not do yoga. She
Okay.
did not. At that time, they were telling people not to move who had MS. You know, don't move, don't exercise.
Right.
And so she was one of those. I remember a physical therapist coming to the house and doing some exercises with her, and it didn't last very long, maybe a few times.
That's a shame. And my first doctor, and that's why one of the reasons he's former, told me the same thing. And that was just 10 years ago. He said, don't exercise. You have to take it really easy. Don't work. And don't worry about your diet. It was really silly. Anyway, moving on.
Thank goodness the word is getting out now.
Yes, absolutely. So I read that you were 29 years old when you took your first yoga class and you were hooked, right?
I was hooked. A friend of mine took me to class, and I pretty much went every day after that, almost every day.
Wow. So I also read that you are a yoga therapist. So what does that mean? How does that differ from being a yoga instructor, I guess?
So being a yoga therapist, a lot of times people think of it like they are getting private one-on-one yoga instruction.
Oh, okay.
But it's more than that, because they're looking at the whole person, the whole being, and they may get into things like wellness, in terms of diet, like you mentioned, or looking at lifestyle, and doing some work in terms of what types of body type does the person have, marrying it together with the ancient Indian science of medicine called Ayurveda. Recently, the International Association of Yoga Therapists came up with their own definition which I'm going to read to you.
Okay,
it
great.
took a committee of it took a few years to come up with this. This was how they developed this new organization, and yoga therapy is really a new profession. So it says, don't worry, it's not long.
Okay.
Yoga therapy is the process of empowering individuals to progress toward improved health and well-being through the application and teachings and practices of yoga. But that key word there is empowering individuals. Mm-hmm. So the yoga therapist is working together with their students to help them find ways to help themselves.
Nice. That is something that I have seen as a thread in dealing with myself for sure with MS, but also with others, that oftentimes, particularly right after diagnosis, I think you feel so, I guess, out of control is the right word, like everything's being done to you. And I think there's such a difference when you feel like you are participating somehow in your own health. So that really resonates with me, that you are, being a part of this and consciously making a change in your own health and taking responsibility for it. And what can you do? Yeah, I mean, there's lots of stuff we can't do to help ourselves, but that we can, we should, and feel very empowered by that. I like it.
Right. So the yoga therapist does an assessment, and then after that, they figure out together what can the student do for themselves.
Gotcha. Very cool. So I think most people have a pretty good idea of what yoga is, but the mindfulness and meditation that I read about in your bio, maybe not so much. Can you maybe define these terms a bit and explain how they can help MSers and how they can be done in conjunction maybe with yoga?
Yes, so mindfulness, it refers to, many people often think of it as meditation, but it's so much more. It's really a way of being, and mindfulness can be applied when people are eating, when they're listening to somebody else talk or communicating. It can be while ambulating, walking. It can be when moving, such as in yoga, or sometimes it's called mindful movement. And so we're basically paying attention to what's going on in the body and in the mind, and at the same time, what's going on in the surroundings. And we often get in the fight or flight mode. So mindfulness helps us to take a step or a pause back and reminds us to respond and hopefully not react.
Oh, that's nice.
So it's kind of a mouthful, and there's a lot of concepts wrapped into one.
Right. But basically it sounds like it's paying attention.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's attuning to what's going on, paying attention to what's going on in this moment. Mm-hmm. Very often we refer to it with this breath, or perhaps I spend a lot of time with my students focusing on sensation. What is the sensation in the body?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, particularly with MS.
Because that brings somebody into their body.
Right.
Very often people who have a condition want to run away from their body, push it away, ignore it. So this helps you make more friends with what's going on, because very often we don't notice things like discomfort until they're screaming at us.
Right. That's
listen to me. Listen, the body's saying, listen to me, listen to me.
Right. Yep. Very loud that body can be.
Yeah.
So talk to me, if you would please, a little bit about meditation, because I think there are some real misunderstandings about what that means. And I know it can mean a lot of different things. I remember growing up, in the 70s and reading about transcendental meditation. And while I found that concept interesting, I found it completely overwhelming. I mean, it was really, you have to sit for this long and you have to, chant, whatever it was too much for me. And I know that meditation can mean a lot of different things. And it's, since the 70s, been distilled down to a lot of different things. So can you talk to me a little bit about what meditation means and how we could utilize that?
Sure. So there's many different types of meditation, and you're referring to TM or transcendental meditation. that is usually where someone pays to get a mantra that they say to themselves during the meditation. And it may bring them to another meditative kind of state. In mindfulness, we're not saying something to ourselves, but rather being with what are our thoughts. We're not trying to push them away. We're not trying to change them. We're not judging them. We're being with them, and hopefully with this idea of compassion towards ourselves or towards others.
Love that.
So that's what we're trying to build.
Gotcha.
So mantra very often is referred to as absorption or trying to get to another state. And with mindfulness, we're trying to be right here, right now, to be present. Gotcha. So they're very, very different. And there's all kinds of meditation. Some people very much enjoy when they're a beginner, staring at a flame. It's referred to as tritech, like a candle flame. It can be very nice and calming to kind of watch the wave of the flame as it flickers, or the color. And that can be a beginning kind of meditation because it gives them something to look at if they don't want to close their eyes. Mindfulness is a little bit harder because the idea is to stay right where you're at. But on the other sense, it's very forgiving because we say if your mind wanders, when you notice it wanders, you just bring it back. You just bring your attention right where you're at.
Very cool. And I love the idea of looking into a flame of some sort. My dad used to tell me when I had a big decision to make, sit in front of a fire and look into it and you'll find your answers. And it never failed me. So maybe I was meditating and didn't know it.
Beautiful. Yeah, you probably were. I mean, it certainly is a type. I don't think we need to get stuck on the rigidity of some of the different disciplines out there. And we do sometimes we'll call it like the 3-minute meditation, or maybe it's a 60-second. Some people, the idea of sitting is daunting. Sitting quietly is, I say to start with, where are you comfortable starting? If it's a minute, start with a minute. Ideally, we'd like to get to 20 minutes or longer, but we start where we're at.
Yeah,
we start,
I like that.
And then we can work from there and build.
Yeah.
And a lot of people use that 3-minute meditation, let's say, before going into a meeting or meeting with someone that, you haven't met, and maybe that gives a little bit of anxiety, or you're going to an event where you've got some concerns. So to just take that pause before walking in. We've been talking to physicians about before you walk into your next patient, how about taking a pause either before you walk in the room for the patient, or once you get in, how about doing a little breath break with your patient? That's a very novel concept, but it's a way to bring mindfulness in, because really the idea is stress reduction at the same time.
I was just going to say, you mentioned the fight or flight, which is obviously stress, which we all know about, and we know how bad that is, and for everyone, but in particular for MS. And a lot of us have anxiety and depression, and it sounds like those types of things would be addressed by, or helped at least by this mindfulness and meditation. Is that true?
Okay. Absolutely. I don't know anyone who couldn't be helped by, of course,
right.
Thinks it's the answer and everything, and it's not a cure, but it works very well along with traditional medicine.
Okay, I like that. So in a flyer that you produced, it says, our students report improved flexibility, balance, focus, circulation, and digestion, reduced fatigue, spasticity, and rigidity, enhanced mood, mobility, and quality of life, learned coping strategies for pain and personal challenges, cultivated improved mind-body relationship, and a calmer central nervous system. That was a lot. So
it sure is.
I mean, that sounds fantastic. Who wouldn't want to sign up for that, right? And we could all use that.
Of course.
But I specifically wanted to ask you about how yoga could help with digestion and pain, because these two seem to really be pretty darn common for most MSers. So if there's something else, another component that we're not, utilizing that could help us with those two things, digestion and pain, I want to bring that to our community. So how can yoga help those?
Sure. So first of all, digestion, very often when we become stagnant or sedentary, digestion kind of halts. Mm-hmm. And so just by moving around can help the process. There are specific poses that are used to help digestion that have been studied and researched, or that yogis from way back, noted how these help change the digestive system. Is twist. Twist help to remove basically what we eat and consume through our body. And I encourage at least a twist a day, if not more. In our classes, in our Yoga Moves MS classes, we often have discussion about digestion and more. And we talk about how often we need to twist, even if you'll forgive me, on the potty, that it can help to do a seated twist.
Right. Well, I'm picturing
that is a common concern.
It is, and I'm picturing as you're talking about this, like wringing out a rag. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So, right. Same idea. Okay. Gotcha. I'm tracking with you now.
Same idea. Yep. Wringing out the sponge.
Yeah.
It's very good for the vertebral disc, and at the same time, it's really good for all our digestive organs. At the same time, we do a lot of talking about digestion when we talk about the ancient Indian science of medicine, which is Ayurveda, I mentioned, because we look at the different body types and we talk about basically what enters the mouth and what goes out the opposite end and how that can help digestion.
Gotcha.
For instance, ginger is so wonderful. So different forms of ginger.
Yeah. I've just started cooking with that recently. I used to think it was way too strong for me, but I'm learning how to sort of temper that and put a little less in. And the ultimate critics are my children, and they're eating it. So must be good, right?
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. It'll grow on them.
Yeah. So, okay, that's digestion. What about pain? How can yoga help with pain?
So pain, we talked about mindfulness, and the reason I actually was attracted to mindfulness is every time I looked at how I help my students with pain, mindfulness kept coming up. The strategy, very often, what's our response to pain? We're in pain, and we're talking chronic pain, not the type where you stub your
not acute
toe and it goes away. We're talking more of the chronic that's longer lasting. And how do we cope? And mindfulness teaches us to be with the pain rather than our tendency, which is to run from pain.
I see.
And so often when we're in pain, we run from the body. We try to do as much as we can to distract ourselves. And mindfulness says, no, let's sit with it. Because the idea is the more we fight something, or like pain, what does it do?
Yeah.
It fights back.
It fights
back and it gets stronger.
Yes, it does.
So the idea is to be with it. And very often when we're with it, we see how it can change. And often our fight or flight or our fear response leads us to think the pain is more than it is, or that we can't be with it. And very often it is intense. So there's different mindfulness strategies about dabbling into pain and just getting a little glimpse perhaps and then backing off. And, and we retrain the mind, because pain actually changes the way our brain works, and they can see it in MRIs, how the brain lights up from the machine. And so by training ourselves through mindfulness, we can actually change what's lighting up. The amygdala shrinks That's the fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
And the hippocampus gets bigger. So we can do a lot with mindfulness. At the same breath, the yoga, very often by moving, helps to decrease inflammation, swelling, and helps to dissipate the pain. And if we can work with some of the yogic strategies that helps with our posture, we also find that pain lessens.
Mm. Got it. Makes sense. I love it.
So there's a lot that can be done through yoga to help pain.
Yes. And I just want to put my 2 cents in for yoga. I love yoga and I started doing it a long time before I was diagnosed. And when I am practicing, more regularly, it really does make a huge difference in all of the things you just mentioned. And for me in particular with focus, which I think is really interesting. So I would not have thought of that. I thought I was just going to do some exercise. Do you know what I mean? But it's so much more than that. And it's been so helpful to me, particularly since my diagnosis. So I'm so grateful for you to be here and share this information with everybody. And I hope people will try it that maybe haven't. I'm also very excited that there are doctors out there that are understanding how helpful this can be. And I want to give you a quote now. This Dr. Matthew Voci he's the director of neurology at Belmont Grosse Pointe Hospital says, quote, observation has taught me that those who do better with their illness are those who take an active role in their health and well-being. The simple act of breathing could become an instrument to one's health and betterment. Adaptive yoga and breathing are referred to in our community as weapons of mass empowerment. I love that. So I know, Mindy, that you...
Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful?
And I know that you teach specific breathing techniques in your classes. So I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind, can you teach us a little something here today? Maybe something having to do with calming down, like dialing down our anxiety for maybe getting into that horrible MRI machine that we all have to get into. That would be great. Would you mind?
A lot of my students claim that breathing helps them in the MRI machine. I've heard it over and over again. And it's just a very simple balance of not having to change anything from where you're at. So everyone can try this by putting their hands on their belly and just feeling the wave of the breath as you inhale and you exhale. So with your hands on your belly, feel the belly expand, and you'll feel the belly swell into your palms. And then as you exhale, the belly lowers back down naturally. And without trying to change anything, feel this natural wave of the breath. In and out, belly expanding, and then softening. And if you wish, you can close your eyes. If not, you can keep them open. So the idea is to just be with where you're at without judgment. Sometimes the breath has sound. Either way is fine. Some people describe the breath, the sound is like an ocean or waves. So it's a soothing. And the breath is right in you. You're born knowing how to breathe. And the air gently comes in and out through the nostrils. And so that's a key here. Unless you're stuffy or have a cold, we want to try to inhale and exhale through the nose. So you might feel some air moving in and then warm air moving out of the nostrils. And it's a breathing in and a breathing out without trying to worry about, am I doing this right or wrong? Very often, this helps us come to the present moment, because when we're attuning to the breath, when we're paying attention to the breath, we are being with this breath, with this moment just as we are. And so the mind naturally wanders away from this focal point in the breath. And you can choose which focal point. Either it could be the belly going up and down, or the air coming in and out through the nose. So we choose what's our focal point, and the mind will wander. The thoughts will go from one thought to the next thought. And when we notice this, because our minds are like little jumping jelly beans. They go from one thought to the next. We just notice it and then return to either focusing on the belly, expanding and contracting, or the air in and out through the nose. And this is a practice. So the breath has the quality of sound. It's an inhalation and an exhalation. We just be right where we are. And so this can be practiced in an MRI machine. It can be practiced in the doctor's office.
That was great. Let me just say, I'm so relaxed right now. And it reminded me, I remember when my kids were babies and I'd watch them sleep and their tummies would, their breath was through their tummy. And I remember thinking, well, that seems right. And it seems like that's not what I do, So even being mindful of where you're breathing from, I think can be helpful. And like you said, go from your belly. So that was fantastic. Thank you.
Focusing on the belly, that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
And then if you can breathe in and out through the nose, that's helpful because it calms the nervous system pretty naturally.
Oh.
When we're in the fight or flight mode, we often breathe through the mouth.
Interesting. Okay, well that makes sense.
So if you think about when you're hurrying to get somewhere, and very often what happens is either the breath speeds up, we gasp, or we actually hold our breath. That's also a very natural response. So this practice can be done just for really a minute or two a day, and then it can be built up to different types of breathing practices, but this is perhaps the most important foundational practice.
I love it. I think this will also help. Oftentimes I have trouble going to sleep, or I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't get back to sleep, but that seems like a perfect application for this, and it's not hard. So I'm going to try it, but that sounds...
Anybody can do it.
Seriously, I'm so relaxed right now. This is great. Thank you. And certainly in that MRI machine, give us something else to think about and concentrate on. I love it. So thank you for that. Can you please tell me a little bit about this wonderful, huge book that you wrote and the videos you have available on your website for sale? By the way, listeners, I'll link to all of this in the show notes, so don't worry about writing anything down. It'll be there for you, clickable links to everything. But yes, Mindy, please tell us about this wonderful book.
This book was an outbreak of students asking for a reference at home. I think they were thinking small, but it grew into a 400-page reference of different yoga poses. And the idea was that we took traditional poses and showed how they could be adapted for anybody, because literally anybody can do yoga. And so the idea is that adaptive yoga is very creative, and the more you play, the more you create, and the more you find may work for your body or someone else's. And so there's a lot of pictures, so not to be intimidated by a lot of reading, because it's really not. It's more instructional, and the instructions are pretty simplified.
Very clear.
And then in a bit, we worked very hard. Thank you. My editor and I spent a lot of time on what was going to be clear for people reading this if they were a student or perhaps haven't tried yoga. I always recommend that people, if they can, go to an adaptive yoga class in their area and use the book as a reference. And then to practice at home, because the students said, well, what do I do when I get home and I can't remember what we did?
Right.
That's how we came up with the book. And in the back of the book are sequences so that they can pick for perhaps like when I get out of bed, what should I do, or what should I do before I get bed, or different things to help out with perhaps spasticity or rigidity in the legs.
Mm-hmm.
So there's sequences in the back of the book, and that's where the videos come in, is that there's an example of 11 of the sequences that can be found on my website.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the videos are paired with the book.
Gotcha. So if people are interested in finding you, your classes, your videos, the book, or even potentially going through your teacher training program, which I know that you're doing to train others to do this.
Absolutely.
How do they find you?
So go to yogamovesms.org.
Okay.
And the info at yogamovesms will go directly to me.
Great.
So they should never hesitate to email me. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Excellent.
And we are trying to grow adaptive yoga in different states. So I am ready and willing to go travel if they know of somebody who wants to host it, whether it's a yoga studio or some type of wellness center who would like to bring adaptive yoga there. Might be the EMS Society. And so we go and bring the teacher training to them so that teachers in their area are knowledgeable and learn how to teach adaptive yoga.
Fantastic.
Safely. Mm-hmm.
That's great. And all of that, they can find all of that on your website. That's great. Well,
yeah.
Thank you so much, Mindy, for sharing your knowledge and experience with us here today, and for all that you do to support the MS community every day. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Take care.
You too.
Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate you listening to the FUMS podcast show. Be sure to subscribe to it so you won't miss an episode. You can do that right on the website at FUMSnow.com. While you're there, sign up for the free email list so you'll be among the first to know of any new findings in MS research, new therapies and products, as well as any blog posts and podcast episodes I release. Want to chat with others in the FUMS community? Join us on Facebook at FUMS Now. Thanks again, and don't forget to talk to the stupid disease as it deserves. Tell it FUMS every day.